Level up with the new AAA Commanders MVP membership. Get all the benefits of AAA, plus exclusive experiences, discounts, and tickets. Already a AAA member? Upgrade for free or join today at AAA.com/commanders. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us here as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. Had a story up last week before the debacle Thursday night about Jaden Daniels, how he's handled all this fame and attention that's come his way. To me, it was interesting just to hear his perspective on all this and people who know him very well, kind of what he's gone through and how he's handled it. So, his life is about more than just that game Thursday night, and it's way more than just that, right? So, and his success is about more than just that game. So, anyways, but I'll be talking about that in a minute. Don't forget the John Keim Report is presented by AAA. So, a couple things before we get to some second thoughts from the game the other night, and just not just second thoughts from the game, but just some big trying to pull some stuff out of there. What does it mean? Before we get there, we'll be doing a live stream Tuesday night, 7:30 Eastern time, first one of the season. I'm hoping to be joined by Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Commanders. Regardless, I will be there 7:30 Eastern time with me and you and answer your questions, your concerns, etc. And you gold members, I'll be doing a private Zoom for you guys on 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. So again, live stream for everybody Tuesday, 7:30 the private Zoom for the gold members on Thursday. All right, so before I get to my second thoughts and all that, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the injuries, and I just want to start off with Jaden Daniels. So the important thing in this kind of situation is to let you know what you know, right? I'm not going to go overboard here because Dan Quinn's going to be talking to us at 3:30 Eastern time on Monday. That's a regularly scheduled press conference, just like basically there wasn't one on Friday, the day after the game. So instead of that, they're doing it the regular time on Monday. So it doesn't mean anything. It's what was scheduled already. I think, again, the key in these situations is don't go overboard. Don't speculate on what's going on. Only talk about what you know. Don't speculate, don't speculate, don't speculate. So what I know with Daniels, as I saw him after the game, he had an ice pack on his knee, excuse me, and I was walking behind him after he came out of his press conference, and he was limping. So I don't think you should be surprised by that, given how that night transpired, but he was definitely limping. Is it, now beyond that, what do we know? Here's what I know in general. Players who have any sort of issue after a game oftentimes will get an MRI. So just, largely out of precaution, like that happens a decent amount, right? So that's what I know. But I think with Daniels, the important thing to say here is, I don't want to sit here and report all this stuff because I just think, again, the smart thing here to do is don't speculate. Let's hear what Quinn has to say and then find out more throughout the day because there will be. And I do think, like, folks, if this was really concerning, that would have come out already. But what does that mean? We don't know yet. So no use speculating on what it might mean for this week, what it might mean for Wednesday, for practice. Beyond beyond today, right now, just let's wait for Dan Quinn to talk about it and see what they have to say and how it's going to be handled. And we'll get more information at that time. So anyways, I think that's the prudent thing to do in these cases. And I tend to go very cautious on these things because just because. So, and I'll share more later. Anyways, then we'll also find out today find out more about Noah Brown and John Bates, both of whom came out of that game with groin injuries. I will say, Dan Quinn, sometimes he's not going to give us a whole lot, and they're not going to, you're not going to get anything because it's a Monday. The players aren't going to be there. We're not going to get probably a whole lot on that, but maybe you get some idea of the severity of it. Is it going to be something that keeps them out a little bit, or is it something that they're going to have to monitor throughout the week? We'll find out more on that. Of course, we already know that Austin Eckler and Dietrich Wise are out for the year. I think that was obvious coming out of that game. After the game, it was, again, I think I told you 1 + 1 = 2 with Eckler especially. And those are key losses. And I think you guys understand that. Listen, man, the hard part with when you try to duplicate what you did a year ago, like, health is a big key. Washington was one of the healthiest teams last year And now, like they didn't have a starter miss more than 9 games. John Allen was a starter who was out the longest, came back and missed what I think it was 9 games total. So they didn't have anybody beyond that miss more than that, and they rarely had multiple starters out at the same time. Like you may have two. I don't know that you ever had four out at one time. Definitely a couple times three, but they're going to be tested in this area. And the problem is when it happens this early, like you kind of brace yourself because you kind of figure something else is going to happen at some point because it's football, it's the NFL. Like that's what happens. Excuse me, excuse me. But that is what happens. So, and that's when you get guys hurt early. That's a big problem. But they're good players and they filled key spots for them. And so now you have to say, how do you replace them? And with Eckler, there are some backs available out there, guys like Gus Edwards, Chase Edmonds out there. I don't know what the status is with his knee. I know he missed last year with the knee injury. I know he's played for Cliff Kingsbury, but I don't know his health beyond that. So there are guys out there, but they're not going to be the answer. And you're going to have to really get some guys from within. That's obviously going to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Jeremy McNichols, and Chris Rodriguez. So the hard part with Eckler is he was a very good third down back. And pass protection is a massive key for anybody in that role. Now, I will say, Krosky-Merritt the other night, I liked one block where he upends the Packers linebacker. So it's really, really good shot of him doing that. But that's one block. So I saw him chipping guys, and that was something else Eckler did really well. Like he's a small guy, but that leverage I think helped when he chipped. And I saw he would knock guys off their path when he chipped, sometimes to the detriment of the tackle because it would knock them to the inside. But he was pretty good at that. So he knew how to play football. I think Wise is the same way. So those are key losses. And with Wise, you have Javonte Jean-Baptiste. I like how he's developed. But then you have Jalen Holmes on the practice squad, and then they can also use that bigger package where you have Javon Kinlaw, and again, it's that 3 defensive tackle package if you want to do that. So they have some options, but you'd rather have Wise there because now you're having to be a lot more creative and versatile. And so that just makes it a lot tougher. And when it happens this early, that really makes it tough. So let's get to my AAA second thoughts from the Commanders game, coming out of that Packers game, and just looking ahead to what that means. So anyways, Commander fans, this is for you. Level up with the brand new AAA Commanders MVP membership. You receive all the benefits of AAA, such as 24/7 roadside assistance, plus chances to win game tickets, access to exclusive team events and experiences, along with 15% off Commanders gear at the online pro shop. Already a AAA member? Add the Commanders MVP membership for free. Head to AAA.com/Commanders to upgrade or join the squad and put your fandom in drive. So let's get to the second thought. So number one, and there's my 5 thoughts come out on Friday, Saturday, whatever. There's more than 5 thoughts here, folks. So bear with me. We'll get through it. But I'm trying to provide, I was able to rewatch a lot of the game, and that's what I spent a lot of this weekend doing. So just wanted to give you some of the stuff that I came away with, and just some perspective and some context, and just looking at some plays, what happened, what went wrong, etc. Anyways, number one thought is Green Bay is an excellent team. And I think, to play them on a short week on the road, and I don't want to make it sound like an excuse. You can still go up there and play better. Like one thing that I appreciated last year with these coaches, especially like Joe Webb, is like, well, your first game is like, I don't want to hear that. You don't care about it being the first game, so it was a tough game. You want, you're still tasked to go out there and do a certain thing or play a certain way. This team did not. So that starts there. Like, could it just be a sign that they're not quite ready for that level yet? Perhaps. But it's also true that Green Bay is very, very good. And I think what they did with the way they play on a short week is a little bit more tougher to prepare for because of speed on defense, because of all the eye candy on offense, like all the motion, all the play action. I just think it lends itself to it's a tough test. Like if this had been a full week, I'm not sitting here saying that Green Bay is not going to win that game again, but is it a little bit easier? Is it better to prepare for them? Well, yeah, of course, because you have a couple extra days, and but I think the way they fool their eyes and all that. So I think let's start with that. Green Bay is very, very good on both sides of the ball, but especially on defense. And I think that sets a tone for everything that they do. And getting Micah Parsons, man, that's why when I did a Micah Parsons reaction video when the Packers traded for him, because okay, they don't get to face him twice a year. but you just made a team that you wanted to contend with for the suit, to get to a certain place. You made them a lot better. And I think we saw that the other night. Like they have some good pieces, and now he just makes all those pieces a lot more effective and better. So anyway, not an excuse that they played on the short week, but I do think it made it tougher for them. And, again, Green Bay is very good. So again, number two, let's have some perspective on this too, because I can look at a couple games from Sunday, the New York Giants. They hung up, a lot of points. Was it 37? I think it was on the Cowboys. Now the Cowboys defense, not very good, but look at what Washington did to the Giants in week one, and then look at what the Giants did in offense did in week two. So what is real at this point? Is it was it a bad game for the Giants, or did Washington defense just play them very well and just not play very well against the Packers because it was a bad matchup? And I think we all know like Matt LaFleur has a good history against a Dan Quinn defense. And I think I'll get into that in a little bit more as to why I think the Packers were so good the other night and what Washington should learn from that. But then you can look at Detroit. Detroit did nothing on offense against the Packers as well. They go out and hang 52 on the Bears on Sunday. So again, the Packers are a pretty good team. And I'm not doing this to minimize. I'm trying to contextualize and add perspective to it's week two. We don't know yet what these games mean. I think we'll get another good sense of who they are on Sunday against the Raiders. But I don't. This is why I don't like to go overboard with one win or one loss because the NFL is just kind of crazy. But you see, Giants shut their offense was dreadful a week ago. Was dreadful, and now you can look back and say, okay, maybe Washington had a lot to do with that. And I thought that at the time. But I also think that especially now with another week, it's like, yeah, they really did make them look bad. And the Giants offense looked really good today. And again, the Packers made the Lions look rather pedestrian. When I watched that game going into last week, it was like, okay, the Lions don't look like last year. Do they miss Ben Johnson, all that? But then you look today, I'm like, well, they kind of kicked Ben Johnson's butt, but they look like the Lions. So they're still very dynamic and very good. So again, Green Bay's pretty good. But I do want, let's say, there's context, perspective. I think that matters. Like you look at the first two games last year, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for them. I'm just trying to add perspective to this conversation. But you look at the first two games last year, if they had played the Giants in week one and Tampa in week two, that's essentially what we just got, right? Like, because the Giants in week one, last year, they moved the hell out of the ball. They just couldn't score. Well, last week, they moved the ball. They had penalties. They didn't, a couple missed opportunities. And then the Bucks game, a big difference, like they did nothing for three quarters. And I have some numbers on Jaden. Actually, you know what? I'll talk about that right now. But I'm sorry. Let me go back. So I'll get to the numbers in a minute. But I think the Bucks game, they were never really in that game. Just like even if they cut it to 7 against the Packers, I don't know that did you ever think they were going to win? I didn't. I didn't think they'd be able to stop them because they hadn't when they needed to. So, but I think that you can look at that and say there were games last year that were bad for them, and if one of those had come early in the season, what would you have thought at that time, right? You were certainly not thinking after week two, you're not, even after week two last year, you're not thinking 12-5. It was after the next two games that you start thinking, oh my gosh, they could be pretty good. So, I think that's something to keep in mind. But I think the difference now is last year, they were a new team. So I get that. Like everything was new. So there was some struggles early was definitely understandable. Well, they're coming off now a 12-win season. So the expectations are higher. So I get that. And I'm with you on that. Like the Giants game, it didn't bother me as much as like, hey, you have these opportunities, you'll eventually cash in. The other night certainly was an eye opener, and not in a good way. But I think the injuries to me are a bigger concern than the loss itself because the injuries impacts your roster and your depth. You can overcome a loss, but the injuries are going to be a little bit tougher if they add up. But again, let's go back to Jaden Daniels. He had tough games last year. I know this is a third thought here, by the way. Jaden Daniels had tough games last year. There's my thought. In the opener against the Bucks. So I'm going to go through three quarters because the other night through three quarters, he wasn't very good. I want to say at least half his passing yards came in the fourth quarter of that game the other night. In the opener last year, through three quarters, he had 106 passing yards. The difference was to that point in that game, 72 rushing yards. The Packers did an outstanding job of not letting him use his strength, a strength of his, which is his legs. So the Packers' speed negated that. So in other words, like what the passing numbers were not good at all, but he was still able to make plays because of his legs and extend drives. And they really couldn't do that the other night against Dallas. He didn't play. He played 1.5 games against them, was not very good. So in the first 3 quarters of those two games combined, well, I'd say the first 3 quarters and then the first half of the second game, he was combined 18 for 34 for 119 yards. And so the point is, he's had these bad stretches before. Like to think that this was, oh, the first time he's played poorly. No, it's not. And guess what? He did pretty well after that second Dallas game where he did not look good and Marcus Mariota came in and looked very good. What did he do? He had a pretty good playoff run. So, I'm just trying to, again, perspectives. Like don't go overboard on one game. I think you need multiple games to see. Now, again, should there be some things you're concerned about? Yes, absolutely. But should you go overboard on one game? No, because last week it was better. The first week, the second week, it was not. Um, I number Another thought is, I mean, clearly Daniels was not on. The passing game was not on, and the question is going to have to be for them is to get to why. And yes, there were definitely times where Terry McLaurin was open. Now, why? The question then is why wasn't he getting him the ball? Because we saw him open last year. And here's the other thing. It's not like this is the first time he didn't see an open receiver or didn't throw to an open receiver. I could take you to a number of times last year where that was the case. The difference was you could make plays to overcome those situations. So maybe with his legs, or maybe make a big play somewhere else. So those misses or the not seeing or the not throwing here, it was overcome. So it wasn't a big deal, right? And so I think like again, perspective. Um, the question I have now becomes with McLaurin, why isn't that working just yet? Because there are definitely times where he's got Terry on a hitch or Terry on a dig, something like that, and he just didn't throw the ball. Why is that? And that's the thing that I want to find out this week is it just a matter of reps? The holdout, the hold in did not help the situation. And last year in the summertime, they looked really good together. That's why after the first two games, where McLaurin had 39 combined yards in the first two games, I thought it was weird because I'm like, I saw it all summer. Their connection is very strong. So you knew it would come about. Like you knew it would get there. Well, we didn't see them this summer. Now we saw it all last year. So eventually I'd say it's going to get there. But he wasn't there this summer. And even though you had all this stuff banked last year, you still need reps together right now. And I think that's what they need now. And so like that, again, I don't think the hold in helped this situation at all. Like not begrudging somebody getting their money. Um, However, but just from a football standpoint, it didn't help because now you lost all that. You lost an entire month and a half or so of you lost OTAs, you lost mini camp, and you lost all of training camp working together to rebuild those reps. And I don't think it's going to take long to get there, but it will take reps. And that's where they're at right now. And so, but sometimes in that game the other night, I think that pressure, first of all, the pressure was intense. We know that. And, for Daniels, was there some blueprint to now expose him? No, because again, he had games last year where teams, again, where the Cowboys did a good job with their speed was helpful in that game, especially guess who? Micah Parsons. So, but did it help other teams? No, it did not. So I don't in the first game against Giants, they were just close on a couple things. And so that one doesn't, I think that's also an indication of where they're at. But I do think this offense this summer did not look great. And part of it was because Terry McLaurin wasn't there, Noah Brown wasn't there. I'm concerned about Noah Brown only because he missed a lot of time there. And now you have a groin injury, and he's got an injury history. So what's his status going to be? And do you have enough at that position, or do you have to now go get someone else to bring in? But anyways, going back to McLaurin and Daniels, Jaden obviously was pressured all game. 46% of his dropbacks resulted in a pressure. That's the most he's faced in his career. That makes a difference. So I sometimes wonder, there are a couple times where I saw him where it looked like, is your internal clock speeding this up? Like, Micah Parsons is rushing over here. Maybe like this is a one-on-one blocking situation. The internal clock's going to be like, how long can you wait for McLaurin to run that deep in, that a deep in before you have to move off to get to somebody else. And sometimes he did that and he might gain seven. Maybe you pass up McLaurin for 16, but you got Debo for seven, or maybe Zach Ertz for eight or something like that. So you're still getting a positive play out of it. Maybe you're not getting the play that you needed, but you are getting a positive play. And I saw that a couple times, but I do wonder about that internal clock being sped up after all that pressure. I don't, it's hard to blame them. But there were definitely a few times where, like, if you're able to hang here, then you've got this ball. And there's one time where it looks like McLaurin's right in his line of vision. He's got a gap that either maybe if you don't want to throw it, you can run through it. Doesn't do it, and I don't know why. I'm sure that he wouldn't. I'm sure he's looked at it 100 times. Um, but it wasn't his best outing. But he's had games before where he looked human because every player does at some point. But I do think some of that speeding up the clock, there's a precedent. It was a precedence because it was happening a lot. Like you had to get rid of it, and he also knew that it was hard to escape that. And so I wonder if sometimes if you're not able to, is something telling you that I've had a hard time doing this, I better stick in this pocket. So anyway, but I do think that they missed some connections. And the good thing is McLaurin is getting open, so it's going to happen again, and you're going to see McLaurin have some big games because of this. So it's not something that I think it's something that you have to get back to, but it's not like McLaurin's not getting free or not getting open against certain coverages. You just have to now, okay, there it is. Now, is it a trust thing or is it a timing thing? And trust only in that, you haven't worked enough on certain aspects together that you got to rebank those reps. And getting that timing back down. And I think that's where we're at right now. I don't think it's any coincidence that it looks a lot for Zach Ertz and Debo Samuel right now. Um, yeah, so there, but anyways, so I don't, I'm not going to sit here. I think you have to get it going, but I'm not going, I'm not going to say that it's the end of the world with that because I think it will get going. It's just a matter of when, but how much game action they need together, how much, before it starts to click. All right. Um, and again, the good thing is that McLaurin is getting open and it's just, to me, it's a matter of time. Um, All right. Oh, then the one thing that the one thought I had is, where was McLaurin on a 4th down and 4 late in that game? And on this one, they went to a slant to Jalen Lane. I think Jalen Lane's going to be a good player for them, but in that slant situation, like he was a slot receiver. He's not a big guy. And there were a couple times they threw the ball to him. It looks like he's open, but he just doesn't. Does he have the size to maybe prevent the defensive back from being able to reach around? How can you avoid that? Is it a matter of just how you're running your routes, maybe, or maybe creating a little bit more separation with with the stem or something? In some of those routes you don't have the chance to do that. So that's one thing I want to talk to him about. Like, how do you negate that? Because I saw that on the slant on that 4th and 4, defensive back was able to reach around. There was another one that was like a deep in or come back something. I can't remember but the defensive back came over him and was able to get it. But I think he's putting himself in position to do some things. But that's something too but I was curious that McLaurin wasn't in there on that play. And the guy that you have running the slant was Jalen Lane, who again came to the NFL with people thinking you're more of a slot receiver. So, all right, another thought. The O-line really struggled, and that's not a thought that was kind of obvious, right? But I think that the thought is, I'm not surprised that there were some struggles. Again, they faced arguably two of the top defensive lines that they're going to face. If maybe not all year, but certainly the Packers have one of the best, and the Giants have one of the best. And you have a line that I think is still a work in progress. And I said this a few times, and I still believe this, that this line probably it's not going to be playing its best ball until the second half of the year because you don't even have Sam Cosmi there. and you have a rookie right tackle who clearly is getting a baptism by fire. You have a left guard who is in his first year at left guard in the NFL. And you have a new left tackle, very good one, but a new one. So and you have a backup right guard in there. So you have a lot of things that are not working in favor for them, and they didn't spend enough time together because Coleman was out for several weeks. So I think like that is something that I'm not surprised that there are some struggles. But even in the week one, there were some struggles. It's just that Daniels was able to make some of those things right or avoid some issues, whereas the other night really couldn't, and it impacted the game. And it wasn't just one guy. I'm going to talk a little bit about Connolly because he's the first round pick, but I saw some struggles with Allegretti. I saw some with Coleman. As you know, I know, so that it was several spots, and everybody's going to have one play, especially when you know, like, okay, you're going to be sitting there pass protection, right? And you get penalties from Tunsil or whatever. So, you're going to see that and you're going to everybody, but Connolly, I'm going to focus on him because again, first round pick, he's the rookie. He's the one that has a higher ceiling than some of the others. So what was going wrong with him? And this is one thing I'd like to talk to some people out there and just get more as we get out there this week. But just when I'm watching him sometimes, I'll slow down the tape to watch him compared to like a Laramie Tunsil. And what's the difference here with the hands, with the knees, with whatever? Because that's a clue. And here's a guy who's made 5 Pro Bowls. Here's a guy making his second start. So a lot of times you see one thing that I talked to Connolly in week one about was being patient against giant rush. I think he's a very patient tackle, but I wonder are you too patient? And your arms are getting wide, you're getting out here, and the guys are getting into his chest. And he maybe gets on their pads, but he's not able to control them in that situation. Whereas you watch Tunsil, his arms, you want him a little bit wide because that's how you get some power. You don't want him too tight, but he's able to keep his hands in tight enough where he can get into the chest if that's where he wants to go there, right? But too often, Connolly, it looks like has been a problem. I think sometimes it's, watching Parsons, he's setting for the outside, and if Parsons was lining up wide of him, more often than not, he was going to cut inside. So is that a talent thing or is that just experience and facing a really good player? So I think it's a few things. There's sometimes you see is it the technique? And so you look for if you're doing everything right and getting beat, that's a bigger problem because then what? But he's not doing everything right at this point. And I think that I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that's the sign for encouragement. I think there's a long way to go for him. But it's why I'm not going to dismiss this guy after 2 games for sure. So what can he do? Sometimes I have one play where I'm looking at him where I have it compared to Tunsil, and you can see Tunsil with his knees bent and getting ready to, and he can anchor and absorb a hit a lot better. I'm looking at Connolly in this one, and his knees aren't bent as much, and he's a little bit more bent at the waist. Well, you're going to lose power. So then what happens? And you're not reacting as well. You want to play, somebody always tell you play your sports with your knees bent a lot of times, especially, if you're in defense, I was a second baseman in baseball, in shortstop and, growing up. And so you knees bent, you've got to be able to react. Defensively in basketball, your knees bent, you've got to react. I think the same thing is true here. So if you're not playing it that way, then you're losing a little bit of your technique. And is that as you get comfortable and more confident, you're able to focus more on that rather than I've got to stop this guy. Now it's it comes a little bit more natural. He's still getting to that point. So I'm not, again, I thought there'd be some struggles, and there have been. This is a lot of what it looked like early in training camp, and then he got better. As he got confident and settled in, then he got better. So, it's been a tough 2 games for him, just as far as the opponents he's facing. Now, would you put in Andrew Wiley? One thing I thought they might do early in the year, just like what they did with Coleman last year, is rotate him with someone, rotate Wiley with Connolly. Wiley is a good professional player, right? And I mean that by he's just a good pro, so he can go in and do whatever whenever he's asked. He's not going to raise a stink or anything like that. But I don't know that I would do anything like that yet because I think there's some things that Connolly does that are pretty good, and whether it's in the run game, getting out in space. I think there's still value. There's obviously a lot of value there. It's just that you've got to get some of this stuff squared away with with some of the technique stuff again because he's getting driven back or losing guys, and I think a lot of it can be more just work, 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 get your technique better. And that's why I'm curious to see where he progresses after the next couple weeks, where he's at midway, and then at the end of the year, I would guarantee he's going to look a lot different because one thing you know about him is he is a worker, and I think that's where it always has to start. Um, but I think like that is something that, which bears watching because it was obviously an issue the other night, and it's going to be hard to survive like that too often. Commanders fans, this is for you. Level up with the brand new AAA Commanders MVP membership. You'll receive all the benefits of AAA, such as 24/7 roadside assistance, plus chances to win game tickets, access to exclusive team events and experiences, along with 15% off Commanders gear at the online pro shop. Already a AAA member? Add the Commanders MVP membership for free. Head to the AAA.com/Commanders to upgrade or join the squad and put your fandom in drive. Another thought, like on Marshawn Lattimore and the defense backs, folks, it wasn't just Marshawn Lattimore that was messing up in the secondary, and at corner. So, Mikey Sarenstill had several issues early in the game, and he had another, he gave up a touchdown catch on to Dobbs, just crosses him up at the goal line, and when he was in press man, I think Amos was out at that point, so he was in there covering. But my point is, it wasn't just Lattimore because I see a lot about Lattimore, but it wasn't just him. And that's, I also think like the Packers did a great job with their man beaters, and Marshawn Lattimore talked about that after the game. So some of some of the stuff that I'll be curious to see, how do you adjust if you face it? And all this stuff is facing a situation and then adjusting. I think the Packers did a tremendous job with their play action game, and you saw it time and again, guys biting on fakes and leaving areas open. It happened on big plays, and then there was, or key plays for sure. Um, but like there was sometimes with Lattimore there was a fourth down play where he gets quote unquote beat, and it was the 4th and 1, I think it was, or whatever it was, where where the receiver goes in motion, and he's got to cut behind the linebackers and corners up and try and get that guy on the flat. Well, even if he plays it perfect, it's a 2-yard catch and a first down. He doesn't play it perfect, and it's a 4-yard catch. So there was another time Sam was still similar situation where the tight end goes in motion left to right, sets up right. Samuel sets outside, then he goes back in motion. You got to cut behind, and the guy has an easy out. So what as a defense you have to learn from those? Like, how do you play those better? Can you bump out? Can you bump out and you basically switch? So somebody then bumps out and takes that guy going out, and then you replace with that guy. Or do you just automatically maybe switch to a zone in that situation? Because they do have situations where they look like they're playing man, and then but it's really a zone. And that way you can negate some of that and maybe prevent them from doing some more of that. Because that was a tough one. There was one time where Lattimore, guy runs across her, and he's running behind people to try and get over there. And it happened with Samuel still too. And like that happened multiple times. So what do you learn from that going forward? Because it was a problem. But I think you're going to see more of that too. Like if they're going to play a lot of press man, which is what they want to do, you're going to adjust to that. But I think the Packers did a tremendous job though with the fakes, with the play action. And man, you saw it a lot. And like there are plays with that 15-yard pass to the tight end. What they do is, and this is where you talk about, marrying pass to run, right? So first play of the game, if you remember, Will Harris charges up and fills a gap where they're running just a duo run, and they throw Josh Jacobs through that hole. He meets him in the hole. It's a 4-yard run. Now it's 4 yards, but he's in that gap. Well, in that 15-yard play to the tight end where they're backed up. Well, I'm going to go back one step, because that duo run, I found a play from the Packers from 2024 where they run, when they're backed up, a similar look, right, to what they faced in that one. So Harris is flying up to the gap to cover his gap, and it looks like a run blitz, but you're filling that gap because of what you've seen. This is what they did when they were backed up last time. This is what it looked like when Jacobs ran that play action, tight end wide open, because Harris responsible for that gap, but also the tight end. Tough ask. So how do you make that a little bit easier or better for your players? That's what Joe Witt has to decide, because on that one, there are a couple other times where, Mikey Samerstill gets caught inside because like if you're you're responsible for a certain run and there's a play action and then boom, now you got to get out to the flat because now you're responsible for the guy going out there too. It can be a tough ask. It's why they get paid a lot. But that's something they're going to have to look at. How do you then negate that going forward? Because is it just a guy being too aggressive, or is there something you're asking them to do that you can clean up with that the next time you face that? That's what all this stuff is about learning. And that because if you don't learn, then you have bigger issues. So that's what I'll be curious to see. Like, is there something that can be done, or is it something like one with Sandwich where there's a clear fake and you're flying inside? Are you overreacting? Do you learn from that based on that? And then it's a constant game of learning here. So um, on the oh, by the way, too, and again, like there was a couple times Quan Martin in coverage. I'm not sure what he was doing, and this is something I'd love to ask him. And like the deep one to the 57 yard to the tight end, you see him coming over to cover 88, who's running a deep crosser, but covered by Harris underneath. And even as Jordan Love is turning and throwing to the other tight end, Tucker, Quan is still breaking over to the other side. And so like that's just one where what weren't you seeing, or what was your job on that play? Well, your job is to stay deep, but what were you seeing that took you over there and not over here? Because this is where he's looking. And there were a couple times like that. Then there was one time with Will Harris where the Tucker scores a touchdown. I don't know that it was his guy. I think he was the last guy in the screen running after him. Doesn't mean it was his guy, because it looks like on that play, the looks like part is he's got the tight end 88 and Frankie Louvu is on Tucker. Louvu engages them. It looks like and they sell the run, and then Tucker just slithers out, and boom. Then who's chasing after him? Harris. But I don't think it was his guy. So I think it's why you always have to be careful for blaming it. I'd say that for me. I say that for anybody, because you don't always know, and you have to go back and look at the play. Okay, what happened? Oh, this is how it looks like it was. I don't know for sure because I haven't talked to anybody about that, but it certainly looked that way, and it's why you have to be careful about how you assess things sometimes. Um, so there are too many mishaps in the coverages, and it's led to too many big plays, and that's something you have to clean up. They did not have that in week one. The Giants certainly saw they had more success in the pass game against the Cowboys, but the Commanders, if you want to take a step, like this defense is going to have to bow up, because if the offense is having a little bit of issues getting things going, then the defense has to come through and they have to start forcing turnovers, because they are getting takeaways. They're not doing that. And that was a problem last year, and it's still a problem. And part of that, you get those with getting big time players who make those plays. Like they need Frankie Louvu to start making some noise. I saw him dropping a lot in coverage this time. So it wasn't like he was always rushing. I did see one thing the Packers did a lot on him and anybody on rush outside, a lot of chips, a lot of chips, a lot of chips. So most times I saw Louvu rush, especially on the edge, I'm seeing him get chipped. So I think that's something that I think impacted this game for sure. It impacted his performance in this game. I don't, all is not lost after this game. I think there's such a long way to go. And what I always like to see is, how does the team respond? You now have adversity because you got a couple guys out. How do you respond? You still have number 5. You still have others who can make plays. So how do you respond? And I think this is where the veteran leadership always helps. And I also think going through last year also helps. They can point to the 3-game losing streak where that Eagles game, it was not great, right? So you can point to those games and say, hey, this is what happened here. And this is how they responded, right? So I think you can do all that and say, all right, take a deep breath, move on to next week. And I would tell you guys that, but I'm hoping you know that. I would tell myself that, because you don't want to overreact to one game. They just have to play better, though, because otherwise one game turns into 2, and you don't want that. So anyway, folks, that's it for me. I'm starting to ramble, so I want to cut that off. I hope that helped. Hope you got some insight out of that. And I'll be back, like I said, I'll be back Tuesday night with Bram Weinstein. The voice of the Commanders are expected to be joined by him for our live stream Tuesday night, 7:30 Eastern time. Join us there and bring your questions, bring your concerns, and we'll know a lot more about the whatever updates health-wise at that point. So look forward to that. Talk to you next time, and thank you.